The 911 dispatcher's voice crackled through the patrol car radio with the kind of steady calm that only came from years of handling chaos. All units, we've got a report of a male subject evading mandatory HOA compliance by barricading himself in his residence. Caller claims the individual may be armed and potentially hostile. Address 47 Lakeshore Drive, Meadow Pine Estates. I nearly choked on my morning coffee. That was my address. The so-called dangerous fugitive they were talking about was none other than me, Police Chief James Reeves. Through the windshield, I could already see 3 patrol units winding their way up the road toward Meadow Pine Estates. Their sirens were silent, but the blue and red lights flashed like warning beacons in the early morning mist. I set my travel mug down, straightened my badge out of habit, and stepped from my unmarked sedan just as the first squad car rolled into my driveway. Deputy Walsh was the first to emerge, hand instinctively drifting toward his duty belt before recognition dawned across his face. "Chief Reeves," he said, sounding equal parts confused and embarrassed. I gave him a dry smile. "Morning, Walsh. Let me guess. Patricia Hartwell?" His shoulders slumped as he keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. We've made contact with the subject at 47 Lakeshore. It's Chief Reeves." False alarm. "Repeat, false alarm," a tired sigh echoed back through the static. "Copy that, Unit 12. Third false call from that address this month. My name is James Reeves, and at 44 years old, I thought I'd seen it all in my 20-year law enforcement career. After years as a detective lieutenant in the city, I'd accepted the position of police chief in the quiet lakeside town of Meadow Pine Valley, population 8,000 on a busy summer weekend. The job came with a nice pay bump, the promise of slower days, and more time to tinker with vintage motorcycles. I was expecting fewer midnight calls about gang activity, not a neighborhood tyrant. Enter Patricia Hartwell, the self-proclaimed empress of Meadow Pine Estates HOA. I'd bought my modest ranch-style home 6 months ago, lured by the calm surroundings and the close proximity to Lake Sterling. The realtor had mentioned an HOA in passing. I figured it was the usual stuff. Keep the lawns trimmed, no neon paint, nothing crazy. I was wrong. Patricia Hartwell was 62, a retired middle school vice principal, and she ran the HOA like a fiefdom. She wore her HOA president title like a crown, complete with a laminated badge she'd had made at the local print shop. Her arsenal consisted of a grass-height measuring tape, an approved color wheel, and a smartphone filled with every city official's contact information. Our very first encounter had been unforgettable. I was unloading boxes on move-in day when she appeared at my elbow like a ghost armed with a clipboard. "Welcome to Meadow Pine Estates," she said with a smile that didn't even pretend to reach her eyes. "I'm Patricia Hartwell, HOA president. I'll need your moving truck permit, your approved color scheme for any future modifications, and your landscaping plan within 72 hours. When I politely told her I had no modifications planned and that the moving truck would be gone within the hour, her smile tightened like a drawstring. "Everyone has modifications eventually," she replied sweetly. "Better to be prepared. Oh, and your mailbox is half an inch below regulation height. You'll want to fix that immediately." I should have known right then that Patricia wasn't the bake sale and holiday lights kind of HOA president. The real trouble started 3 months later when I missed a quarterly HOA meeting. Not because I wanted to skip it, mind you. I'd actually planned to spend that Thursday evening listening to the riveting debate about approved mulch colors and the HOA's ongoing war against dandelions. But 30 minutes before the meeting, I got the call. A hit and run on Highway 12. Margaret Chen, 78 years old, was sideswiped while walking her poodle. The dog was fine. Margaret had a broken wrist, and we had a suspect to catch. Call me crazy, but I figured catching a fleeing felon took priority over arguing about bird feeder limits. Patricia disagreed. The next morning, a flyer was tucked under my windshield wiper in Comic Sans font that screamed passive aggression. "Attendance builds community. Your neighbors noticed your absence at last night's crucial meeting. We discussed important matters including, but not limited to, the amendment to Section 4.3b regarding decorative garden gnome height restrictions. Your input was missed." I laughed, tossed it in the trash, and went on with my day. That was mistake number 1. 2 days later, a certified letter landed in my mailbox, outlining how my pattern of non-participation in HOA community building exercises could trigger an emergency residency review. 3 pages long, 17-sided bylaws, more whereas statements than in a congressional bill. I read it over breakfast, laughed again, and recycled it. Mistake number 2. Patricia escalated like a general prepping for. D-Day first came the wellness checks, which she insisted on calling community care visits. The first one happened at 6:15 a.m. on a Saturday. I opened the door, bleary-eyed and wearing pajama pants, to find her on my porch with a deck stain color fan. "Just checking on your deck coloration," she chirped, leaning to peer around me like a raccoon after garbage. Some neighbors are concerned it may be drifting toward unauthorized auburn rather than approved mahogany. I didn't even have a deck. She made a note on her clipboard. "Planning to add one then? You'll need 3 forms and architectural approval." Then came the surveillance. 2 weeks later, she installed what she called a bird-watching camera on her property, perfectly angled at my driveway. She claimed it was for purple finch migration. Somehow, the only thing it ever recorded was me coming and going, and of course, she couldn't resist the social media campaign. Patricia posted a grainy photo of me on the neighborhood app with the caption, "Unknown male, possible drifter, seen entering residence at odd hours. Stay vigilant." The photo was literally of me in full uniform, badge shining on my chest. Most neighbors ignored it. But her loyal trio of retired busybodies liked, commented, and shared it like it was breaking news. One comment said, "I've seen him too. He drives very slowly past the playground." "Yes, Karen," I muttered when I saw it. "That's called obeying the 15 mph speed limit." Another neighbor chimed in. "He seems to get a lot of packages. Suspicious. I was living in a small lakeside community. But thanks to Patricia, it felt like I'd moved straight into a surveillance state." The packages, of course, were nothing more sinister than car parts for my '67 Mustang restoration project. But in Patricia's world, apparently having hobbies was grounds for suspicion. Then came what I've come to call the meeting incident, though in the official police records, it's labeled as misuse of emergency services. Case number 2024-179. It was a Thursday night. I'd set a phone reminder, laid out a clean shirt, and was determined to attend the HOA's quarterly meeting to finally put an end to Patricia's harassment with the most dangerous weapon of all: boring, by-the-book compliance. But 30 minutes before the meeting, my phone rang. It was dispatched. An elderly man named Walter Briggs had gotten his kayak wedged in the reeds near the old fishing pier. To make matters worse, a territorial raccoon had claimed the vessel as its new kingdom. Walter was stranded and terrified. The raccoon was hissing like a feral banshee. "Animal control was 45 minutes away," I responded. "Because that's what you do when you're the police chief, even when the emergency involves an octogenarian, a kayak, and an angry raccoon." An hour later, Walter was safely back on shore, and the raccoon was relocated after some delicate negotiations involving a long pole and a can of tuna. But by then, I'd completely forgotten about the HOA meeting. As I drove home, Patricia's house came into view, lit up like a Christmas display, every board member's car crammed into her driveway. I figured I'd find another passive-aggressive flyer on my windshield the next morning, or maybe a letter threatening residency review. What I didn't expect was Patricia calling 911. Later, when I reviewed the dispatch recordings for the official investigation, I nearly laughed out loud. Patricia had told the operator that a resident was barricaded inside his home, refusing to comply with mandatory community engagement protocols. She said she could hear violent yelling and erratic hammering coming from inside my house. She suggested, quite dramatically, that I might be mentally unstable and dangerous. For the record, the yelling was me singing along to Creedence Clearwater Revival while making dinner. The hammering was me installing a spice rack. The responding deputies were 3 officers I'd sworn in personally just 2 weeks earlier. Deputy Walsh later told me he'd never forget the look on his face when he realized they'd been dispatched to their own chief's house. Deputy Martinez said the red flag was when Patricia insisted they proceed with extreme caution because the subject might be Modifying property without authorization. Deputy Johnson just muttered something about overtime not being worth this level of absurdity. I stepped out of my house calmly, badge clipped to my belt, hands visible. Every movement measured, not for the deputies, but for Patricia, who was sitting in a lawn chair across the street, holding binoculars and stargazing through a cloudy sky. The radio chatter, of course, got picked up by every scanner hobbyist in town. Dispatch, Unit 12, Walsh said, trying not to sound mortified. We've made contact with the subject. It's Chief Reeves. Scene secure. No crime committed. False emergency call. Patricia rose to the occasion with all the subtlety of a bad community theater actress. Oh my goodness, Chief Reeves, she gasped, clutching her chest. I had no idea it was you. You weren't wearing your official badge when I saw you through the kitchen window, and I was so worried. When you didn't attend the mandatory meeting, I thought something terrible had happened. Deputy Walsh, God bless him, kept a straight face. Ma'am, did you identify yourself as an HOA official when you called 911? Patricia lifted her chin proudly. I am the duly elected president of Meadow Pine Estates Homeowners Association. It is my duty to ensure the safety and compliance of all residents. That was the moment I decided enough was enough. That night, I filed a formal complaint for misuse of emergency services. By morning, I'd also contacted the town council to request an investigation into HOA overreach. Mayor Davidson, who had once been the target of Patricia's wrath over a flagpole issue, didn't need much convincing. Within a week, the investigation revealed that Patricia had made 7 false emergency calls in the past 2 years. One was about an inflatable flamingo, allegedly causing visual chaos that could trigger seizures. Another claimed suspicious, foreign chanting, which turned out to be a Korean family singing happy birthday. My personal favorite? She once reported unauthorized gathering of potential gang members. It was a 10-year-old's Pokemon card trading party. The town attorney dug through the HOA's bylaws and unearthed a laundry list of violations. Patricia had fined residents for infractions that didn't exist in the covenant. She held meetings without proper notice. She used HOA funds to fuel her personal vendettas. She'd spent $300 of HOA money on the bird-watching camera she'd pointed directly at my driveway. Her excuse, that it was to track purple finch migration, crumbled fast when an ornithologist explained that purple finches didn't migrate anywhere near Meadow Pine. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday. This time, I didn't forget. I walked into the community center in full uniform, flanked by the town attorney and a stenographer. Word about the 911 call had spread like wildfire. Residents who hadn't attended a meeting in years showed up, eager to watch the fireworks. Patricia sat at the head table, gripping her wooden spoon, gavel, and trying to maintain her queenly composure as 2/3 of the room glared at her. She banged her spoon and tried to call the meeting to order. I raised my hand. As the investigating officer in case number 2024-179, I said, my voice steady, I need to address the board and membership regarding misuse of emergency services. You're out of order. She snapped, banging the spoon again. This isn't on the agenda. The town attorney stood. Actually, Patricia, public safety matters override agenda restrictions. Section 12.4 of your own bylaws. What followed was methodical and devastating. I laid out each of the 7 false emergency calls, complete with dispatch audio and officer reports. I detailed the misuse of HOA funds, the illegal enforcement of fake rules, and the personal harassment campaigns. With each revelation, murmurs rippled through the room. Patricia's complexion shifted from red to purple to a sickly shade of pale. Then I dropped the final bombshell. Based on these findings, and in consultation with the town council, I announced, I'm proposing a vote to dissolve the Meadow Pine Estates Homeowners Association for repeated legal violations and abuse of authority. The room erupted. Someone clapped. Then another. Within seconds, 3/4 of the room was applauding. Patricia's spoon cracked against the table. You can't do this, she shrieked. I've given 5 years of my life to maintaining standards in this community. Bob Kowalski, a longtime resident, stood up. Patricia, you measured my grass with a ruler at 5:45 in the morning. Another woman added, You fined me because my garden hose was coiled counterclockwise instead of clockwise, an elderly man shouted from the back. You called the cops on my grandson's lemonade stand. Patricia tried to respond, but her microphone suddenly cut out. The staff blamed technical issues. The smirk on the sound tech's face told a different story. When the vote was called, 118 of the 123 residents voted to dissolve the HOA. Only Patricia and her 4 loyalists opposed. As the results were read aloud, Patricia stood abruptly, knocking over her water glass. "This is a coup!" she barked. "This is illegal! I'll sue every single one of you!" The town attorney calmly reminded her that dissolution was entirely legal with a supermajority vote under state property law. Soon after, Patricia was formally charged with misuse of emergency services, a misdemeanor that carried up to a $5,000 fine and possible jail time. 2 months later, she appeared before Judge Wheeler. She tried to argue she was performing her civic duty. The judge didn't buy a word. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said dryly, "calling 911 because someone missed your meeting is no to civic duty. It's criminal stupidity." He sentenced her to 100 hours of community service and a $3,000 fine. Patricia's jaw dropped. $3,000? But that's my cruise fund. Then, Judge Wheeler replied without missing a beat, I suggest you find a new hobby that doesn't involve wasting taxpayer resources.